What's happening, everybody? This is Sinister. I'm here at 3rd Street Tattoo in Hermosa Beach, South Bay. We're representing tonight. This is like one of the few people that were, willing to support me right out of prison. So this is my second art show since being out of prison, and I have to say I feel blessed. It's a great night. I'm running into a lot of friends I grew up with. A lot of people are really supportive. A lot of people are embracing my art. A lot of people didn't realize that I could do what I could do with my artwork, and it's been really cool. So tonight's event is a charity to support everyone that are victims from the wildfires here in Southern California, in Malibu. It was actually pretty cool that I was contacted because of my art, not because friends of friends and said, hey, he's just out, let's do this. So some of those things are starting to take place for me, and it's really cool. Today I was contacted by a New York magazine that wants to do an article, and so a lot of things are happening, and it's really cool to kind of see that life after prison has a lot to offer, and I'm really excited to kind of see what all this goes and what lies ahead for the future. We're just all here and a lot of love and a lot of good times, and I'm really happy to be here and be a part of Fresh Out.
When I first heard Jason got pinched, I honestly wasn't even that really surprised, just from the things that, I heard he was up to, and he's always gone pretty big in life with anything he's ever done. So I'm glad, now that he's out, he seems like a changed man. He is a changed man. He wants to do the right thing, and he knows what he was doing was a dead-end road eventually, and he did his time, and I'm happy for him, and I'm proud of him.
All right, everybody, what's happening? This is Sinister. We're finishing up, or at least I'm finishing up. I'm headed back to house arrest. So tonight we did pretty good. It was one of my first art exhibits, and I sold a couple pieces, and more than anything, it was just kind of the excitement, and it's a blessing to be involved and to know that it was for a charity. So I'm hoping that we raise even more money tonight as I depart. The sales are hopefully still gonna happen. And I was really excited to be there with Big Herc and Fresh Out. And I feel blessed to be a part of the show. And it's all good, it's all love all the way around. And look forward to, in many months to come, when we do another backup episode and we see where everything's gone. I think it's really gonna take off, and I'm pretty stoked. And I really am happy that I got to see a lot of my old friends tonight, people I grew up with from grade school. I've been here in the South Bay my whole life. So it's cool to kind of be back out of prison and, around all the love. I really appreciate everybody. Thank you.
What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916, and you're tuned in to another Fresh Out interview. I'm here with my man, Jason, AKA Sinister Monopoly, AKA Sin, and he's got a hell of a story. If you guys have seen Blow, then when you hear this story, you're gonna be like, oh shit, because my man got a hell of a story to tell. So Sin, man, why don't you drop some knowledge on him, man, and tell him about your story and a little bit about your background.
Right on. So what I want to do is I want to kind of start a little something, because a lot of people, when they know that I'm telling this story and I know that I'm going to do an interview like this, they think, oh, you're giving away the game. You're letting the feds know things that they shouldn't know, and you're disclosing information on dope dealers that they don't want out. So I want to let people know that, my case was massive. I was investigated for probably close to 2 years, and the feds had wiretaps. They had people wearing body wires. They had GPS trackings on my airplanes. I mean, you name it, they had it. And I have all of these files right here, right? So this is like, I'm not putting everybody on blast. I'm not fucking putting people, this is all stuff people know about. Like these discs have 1,100 pictures. They have, wiretaps. They have videos. I mean, you name it, it's all on file. It's public record. you Google my name and you put drugs in there, you're going to have press releases from the IRS, from the Homeland Security, from the FBI. So I want to start by saying that I'm not disclosing, I'm not, like putting people in a bad situation by putting the game out there. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, I guess we can kick this off.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, like where you grew up, man, and where you're from. And
so I grew up here. Today we're at my house in Manhattan Beach, and this is where I grew up in Manhattan Beach. So I've grown up in Manhattan Beach since kindergarten all the way through high school. I went to schools in Manhattan Beach. In high school, I was kicked out because I used to hang out with kids that were, they had already graduated, so they were already out of school. So what I was doing, I was a DJ, and I had, 1,200 turntables. I would go on like a Thursday night when I'm not supposed to be, and DJ till 2, 3 in the morning. And then I wouldn't show up at school the next day, right? So eventually I was kicked out of my high school, which is Maricosta in Manhattan Beach, and sent to a continuation school. And so that kind of all started my little riffraff, I was in the hip hop community. There was a trippy story that when I was a DJ, I went to buy records in Gardena at this place called the Rhodium Swap Meet. And I met a DJ who was affiliated with NWA. And so I'm there and he's wearing like a Letterman's jacket and it says NWA straight out of Compton. And at that time, I'm all into DJing and I'm probably like 16, 17, you know what I'm saying? And I hit him up because he's buying a lot of records. And me as a kid, I'm just buying like a small little stack, So we exchanged numbers and eventually I hit him up and he's like, oh, come down. So next thing you know, some of my buddies who I grew up with in high school, we're rolling down and we're hanging out with Ice Cube, Eazy-E, and it's weird because we're like some white dudes, right? And, it wasn't those guys that invited me over, but it was a dude that rolled with them. His name was DJ Speed. So people would trip because DJ Speed would come up to the high school and they'd be like, oh man, look at Sin. He's fucking hanging out with NWA. And I would go to these things. So that kind of was a precursor for my like lifestyle into like, black market things and criminal activity and gangster shit. And so I grew up with a good family here in Manhattan Beach. My dad owned a bunch of dry cleaning businesses. One of them was at the Manhattan Mall right up here next to the Ralph's supermarket. So I would go up there before that one was even built. We would be messing around and doing stuff. And so I grew up in a entrepreneurial family. My dad eventually, had dry cleaners all throughout the South Bay here, is what we call the South Bay. It was in Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach. So in a way, some people think like, oh, you're a spoiled kid, from good family and stuff like that. But at the same time, my dad always instilled in me that his money is his money and I need to go get my own, that he's not gonna buy this or that for me. So the school I went to, these kids had like, their parents would get their old BMWs, their old Mercedes and stuff like that. But when it came time for me to get a car, my dad was like, no, you got to get your own car. You know what I mean? So in a way, through my dad having those dry cleaners and telling me that I got to go get my own, it kind of created a monster with like, I need to hustle. So then I was out there DJing and I'm out here like 15 starting to DJ and my mom's dropping me off at house parties, doing stuff like that. So that's kind of my background. And then eventually, through leaving my dad's dry cleaners, I worked there, I started a window tint shop. And I started that initially in Lawndale. And so I started window tinting and then I rented half of my shop out to a person that did like car stereos and alarms. And then that really brought in the element of a lot of like criminal activity because my shop was like a hood shop. People come through and they want sounds in their cars. They want their windows tinted. We got drug dealers coming by. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of just led into, so I started seeing like, I'm in here grinding, and at this point I had stopped DJing and now I own this window tint shop and my shop was called Paradise Auto. And so I had a lot of people coming through and I started seeing dope dealers, like they're making money. They got the nice cars. They're coming in and they're spending thousands on their sound systems. And I started thinking, well, fuck, I got to get in the game. You know what I'm saying? And so I've always been the kind of character where I have like a lot of shit going on, like black market, you know. And then at one point when I had that window tint shop, I worked with some dudes. Once I got my first Porsche, right? I was always been a Porsche dude. So then I ran into some dudes that were actually a Porsche theft ring. And so I became good friends with them. Next thing you know, I'm getting like Porsche parts dropped off in my shop, like sawed off cars. And next thing you know, my shop has 15, 20 Porsches out front, you know? And so here I am, you know, doing Porsches. And then at one point, I'm all over the map. Some of my friends laugh because of the shit that I do, right? And so at one point, then I started doing, I started dating this girl, and I didn't know quite what she did, and she said she was a stripper, right? But in the long story short, she was doing in-call massage, and eventually she broke it down and was like, hey, this is what I do. And I analyzed it. I'm like, fuck, how's that? You know what I'm saying? So next thing you know, I start a place where I'm doing, you know, like these massage places, and it gets kind of crazy and hot doing that too. So I opened up an escort service here in LA. And first people were like, how do you even do that? But I went through a lawyer, and I figured out, fuck, you can get a business license. And so here I am, I'm doing, you know, Porsche shit. I'm running an escort service. At the same time, I had a website where I'd have all these girls on there, and people could call and order girls and do this and that. And then I have like friends of mine that come to my auto shop that are big time, you know, marijuana growers, right? So then I start moving some elbows. I start moving some bud for him. And so he, in turn, has a buddy that's flowing really big, you know, like massive weight in the bud business. So what they do, and some of us do, is we buy customers. Like, so let's say, you know, you work with one of my boys, and I get out my boy and I say, let me buy Big Herc off you. So he wanted to buy me as a customer because he knew that I was big, you know, starting to be big in the game, and I had this shop and I was doing shit. So eventually my buddy was like, you know, I'll sell Jason to you as a client, and you guys, I'm out of it, and do your thing. So my buddy and I started just kind of flowing real hard, you know. He started shooting me all this bud all the time. So eventually I was like, you know, this is working out pretty good. So what I did is I ended up getting rid of all the other stuff. You know, I got rid of my tint shop because I would never go there. I got rid of the escort business because it was just a little too much, you know, to deal with. And at such a young age, at that time, when I was doing that, I was probably like my early 20s, right? So then I shut all that down because it was way too much. I had all these commercial properties for rent. I rented my escort. I had a website. I had the tint shop, my own place. And here I am probably like 21, 22 years old, you know? And so I just said, you know, I'm going to do this, you know, this cannabis, this bud thing, you know, 24/7. So I start doing my thing, and I'm just grinding all over, you know, the streets of LA, you know, and that was when I was more hands-on, you know. I learned a lot in the game, you know, as far as not being flashy, right? The dude that originally like bought me as a customer and we started working together, he was like, hey, you're out of control with the Porsches. I can't hang out with you because you're doing the Porsches. You know what I mean? Like, mellow out. Look at me. I'm in a minivan. You know, I'm low key. I'm this, right? And so I wanted to think that way, but I'm hip hop. You know what I mean? I'm all about like the flash, the bling. I got my Porsches. I'm moving weight. I'm doing this and that. You know, and it was like instilled in me. And so it was hard for me to like say, okay, I need to take this back and not bring heat on myself, right? And so it was really hard for me to kind of understand that concept. So eventually I start becoming really, really big with the bud, and I'm getting it out everywhere. It's just all over the streets. And I meet people, because I grew up here in like a beach neighborhood. I surf, I skateboard, I snowboard. I'm like an X Games type of person, right? So I know people from the Porsche game, black gang member dudes, right? And I'm hitting them up like, yo, turn me on to some of your people. Let me get some of your customers. And they're like, fuck, you're crazy, bro. If I bring you down to the hood, they're going to hang you out to dry. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, well, we'll see about that. You know what I'm saying? And so I had already hung around people, like when I was doing my DJing and NWA. So for me to go in the neighborhood wasn't like something I was scared of. You know what I mean? Some people, like other people from the beach and all the surf kids and you know, Gary, who you guys interviewed earlier, they would be like, fuck, you're crazy, bro. You know? But I had a lifted 4-wheel drive truck. I'd throw my Rottweiler in there. I'd roll around South Central. I'd roll around Compton with hundreds of pounds. I'd roll up to your shop. What's up, Herc? Fuck, I got you, dude. Throw you, 50 pounds. You might owe me, 70, 80,000, whatever. All right, I'll see you later. And then people trip that like this white dude is rolling like that, where people sometimes, I remember a good, interesting story. So I had this dude out of Compton, right? And I used to give a lot of bud to him. And he would always have a lot of people in his house when I came over. And I would tell him like, yo, dude, I don't want people to see me when I come over here because, they go up the street, they tell buddy up here like, yo, this dude's getting served by white boy, whatever, right? So there was a dude in his house one day who made some like derogatory remarks like about me being white and in their house in Compton and me being the dude. So my buddy who I was serving at the time with a bunch of bud, he shut him down. He said, look, bro, this house that I'm in right now and this car is because of this dude right here. This dude provides all of this. This is how I eat. So you need to fucking, watch what you say because this is my boy right here. So it was that kind of like respect that a lot of people had for me because I'm not afraid to go into situations, but I was putting food on the table for a lot of people, and a lot of people have, families and kids, and, I was providing a way for them to, make money at that time. So a lot of people wouldn't try to, get over on me, at least in my face, And so I think a lot of people respected the fact that I could come into neighborhoods like Compton and South Central and just be one of them. You know what I'm saying? And so eventually, as I was doing bud, I started thinking, well, fuck, dude, this guy is like eating a lot of my profit where I'm getting it from, right? So he kind of let it be known that all the bud that he was shooting to me was coming from Canada. So as I became like bigger and I'm floating around and I'm making moves and I'm doing shit, at this point in my life, I was more hands-on, And then I started getting a little better. I started using like a stash house. When a load would come in, I'd shoot it to my boy's house, pay his rent, so he would, watch everything. So I don't keep the work at my house where I sleep at night. So if DEA kicks in my door, what do you want? I got nothing. You know what I'm saying? So I started kind of learning the game on a bigger, better, level. And so things started escalating for me. So then I ran into a new plug and he had Canadian connections, right? And some people refer to like Canadian bud as BC, and they say, oh, it's not that good. But at that time, when I would get a load of cannabis from Canada, I might get like 300, you know what I'm saying? And so when I would get them, there would be maybe like 20 different kinds. There's Sugar Shack, there's Sugar Bear, there's Hash Plant, there's Juicy Fruit, all these different strains, and this was many years ago before all this recreation and before medical, this was long before that. You might see me in one of my little stash houses and I got 900 pounds, you know what I mean? And I'm just dishing them out, all over the streets. And so one dude hit me up and he was like, hey, I got people up there in Canada. Maybe you should meet with them and work with them. So next thing you know, I kind of end up meeting some other Canadians and I'm working. And so at this point in my life, I maybe had like 2 or 3 plugs. And a lot of the bud I was getting at that point was from Canada. And so when I would work with the Canadians up there, they would cross the border into Seattle. And then the dudes in Seattle, we would call it a jump or the hop, like hop the border. And so we used encrypted phones. And on our encrypted phone, he would be like, hey, they're going to jump today. I got, 500 coming your way. Dude in Seattle's going to wheel it down. So we had a crew. So the manufacturing was in Canada, right? And then it would cross over into the Seattle, Washington area. Those dudes would break the load down. And when the load came into Seattle, Washington, it would be with lots of other people. It wasn't just my load, right? It was maybe, let's say, close to 200 pounds. All right, so as I started meeting more Canadians and some of the bigger dudes I worked with up there, We worked with, like I mentioned, we had encrypted phones. They would give me a heads up like, hey, we're making the jump today. When it crosses over, it's going to go, and they'll unpack it. You know, we'd land at a spot up in Seattle, and we call those the catcher. You know, the catcher's catching it, and they break them down. And so the load would be not just my work, but other people's work. So there might be a total of, 1,500, 1,700 pounds in that ride, our ride across. So when the ride comes in, they get it over to Seattle and they bust it down. They had identifying markers that were like labeled, this is Sinister shit, so then this is dude shit. And so all my shit would come, and then the dudes from up there would wheel it down, right? They would wheel it down, and they would hit me like it'd take a day and a half to get down here. Hey, we're in town. They would drop, maybe 400 or 500 pounds, and then shoot back and be like, hey, we'll be back in another 2 days, 2-3 days. There was a crew that manufactured all of the cannabis in Canada. There was a crew of, we call them TP, which TP is for transportation. And we call it like wheeling it, We would wheel it down. And then so when you get in here, I have my network of distribution, right? So they have, like, let's say my warehouse, my stash dudes. I tell them, hey, the dude's coming. He'll be here in an hour. Boom, he drops it off to my people. My people tell me, hey, bro, I got all that. I went through them. There's 400. So then I started getting less hands-on. And I'm more of like texting and making moves like, this dude's gonna be here. I'm delegating when shit's coming across, when it's landing, when it's coming down. I'm making these moves, and at this point, I'm no longer really the dude that throws the duffel bag in the car and rides over to your crib. Now I'm the dude where it's like, yo, go here, see homeboy, bring him a 100-pack. Bring this guy a 50-pack. How much money does he have? And then, as you can see, then I started being just the money dude. So then I would go to my various locations and be like, I'll cruise over and pick up money. So at that point, I had, let's say this dude over here, he'd go and say, oh, I dropped off a 100-pack to this dude. And then I saw this dude. He might have saw 7 or 8 people in one day. Mm-hmm. Then at the end of the day, he'd be like, come through, I got your paper. So he would hit me up, and I would come here back to my house, and I would spend all night. I have my TV on, and I would just be up there fucking counting money. I used to think this shit was fun. I'd have millions of dollars laid out here and taking screenshots and listening to my, I thought this was the life, you know what I'm saying? Like, I fucking made it, you know what I mean? So then I start getting like things even getting, bigger as my network of like just flowing all this weed, all this cannabis everywhere. So I met some dudes that, he's like, hey dude, I know some dudes in Detroit. Well, actually, before we go there, let me back it up. So I'm serving out weed here and cannabis out here in the streets of LA, right? And so I'm thinking I got the shit, but some people, they refer to it, oh, you got BC bud. It ain't all that. You know what I'm saying? And everyone's like, we got this, they got that. So Kush kind of came on the scene, and mm-hmm. Kush is a strain of bud. And so back when Kush came around, I was kind of dropping stuff off, and I might run up to people that hang out with celebrities, They're like, oh, I was here with such and such, and we had the fucking Kush, and he doesn't want your BC bud. And I was like, what? Well, what is this Kush? You know what I'm saying? So I was at one dude's crib one day, and I started seeing him fucking dump off pounds of weed for like $6,000, $7,000, right? And I'm thinking, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, at this point, like a pound in LA was like 4,000. Mm-hmm. And so for him to shoot him out for like $6,000, and I was like scratching my head going, fuck, this is kind of a trip, right? So I hit him up and I was like, I need to get some clones. And everybody at that time in LA would only have, 10 pounds of Kush, 5 pounds of Kush. There was nobody in the streets of LA. This was before medical marijuana. This mm-hmm. is before recreation. Nobody in the streets of LA could, let's say, back the truck up and dish out 300 pounds of Kush, mm-hmm. right? So I was cruising around and I'm like, fuck, I need some clones. I need to get these clones. And at that point too, I kind of messed around with a little bit of growing, manufacturing my own. But at that point, it got to the point where the Canadians were shooting me, a few fucking 1,000 pounds a month. Why should I grow my mm-hmm. own? You know what I mean? It didn't make sense. So I hit up my people up top, and I'm like, yo, there's a strain out here where dudes are getting a grip for it, right? And so they're like, shoot it, we'll get it out there for you. So eventually I fucking found Kush clones, and nobody wanted to give them to me, at least the people I knew, right? They're like, fuck, dude, they don't want to give them up. And so I was throwing money at them going, I'll pay you extra. You know what I'm saying? So in the end, I think I bought like 50 plants for like $5,000, right? So then I take these 100 clones, and I shoot them to my Canadians, and I shoot them all the way across the border to Canada. And they're like, we'll start manufacturing. We're going to spread them. They're going to spread like wildfire. So in the meantime, they're shooting me my 500 packs, and I'm getting those. And then I start getting a little bit like pissed because Kush is starting to kind of get bigger, and people maybe don't want the BC bud, and Kush is on the scene, and I'm like, I need my Kush. You know what I'm saying? Because I could only get a little bit around town. Nobody had it big. So I'm hitting these dudes on my encrypted phone, and I'm like, yo, what's up? One of those coming? And they're like, we're spreading them. All the growers are getting them. Just be patient, you know? So then they used to write with a Sharpie, like what the strain was. And I got some that said Yankee Kush, which they were like referring to me as the Yankee. And then I was like, yo, that's not what I gave you. And then I started hitting them up going, are you giving my shit to somebody else and trying to make more money? I was almost feeling like disrespected, you know what I'm saying? So then they're like, no. And then finally, I got a load came through, and it had like 4 or 5 Kush. And I hit dude back instantly. I'm like, that's the shit, bro. That's what I gave you. That's what I want. So then the next load comes through, and there's like 75 or 80 of them. And those things are gone in a matter of fucking minutes. Because at this time in LA, like I could dump off so that my other people had room to make money. I would shoot them some Kush at like $5,000 a pound, $5,500, and I would get it for like $3,000. So at this time, imagine like I could go to your place, let's say hypothetically, shoot you a 20 pack, and I could make $40,000, which is kind of unheard of when it comes to selling cannabis. Most dudes make like, oh, I made $200 on a pound. You know what I'm saying? And here I am, I'm making $2,000 on a pound. You know what I'm saying? So now it's starting to I'm starting to elevate my income. I'm coming back to the house, and I'm like, fuck, I'm just stacked up with profit. I'm making, you know, $100,000 every couple of days, you know? So after the Kush came in, you know, to LA, then it started coming heavy in the sense is now all of a sudden it's like, yo, we got 400 pounds. And as far as I know, because I knew a lot of dudes in LA, either other dudes that flowed hard and heavy and growers. I was in the scene, and I knew of people maybe that I didn't even work with, but they couldn't hit like I could hit on the Kush level, right? So now it's like all of a sudden it's escalating in the income, you know, it's mansions, it's Porsches, it's, even though I've always been a Porsche dude, right? Now it's like, it's Harleys, it's endless cash. I mean, anything I wanted, I could have it. And I didn't pay attention to like prices on things, you know what I mean? If I wanted something, there it was, right? So I like to think of myself as like the inventor of Canadian Kush at that moment in time. Now it's like Canada bud is like useless because the price for cannabis in LA is so far down. Like the price of a pound is, let's say it's like 2,000, and even that's a lot, right? You can't cross the border with Canadian bud. So now this is like obsolete. You know what I mean? Plus it's legal up there now. So back then, at that point, you know, I'm just flowing hard and heavy. A dude hits me up and he's like, hey, I did some time with these dudes in Detroit, and they got some trap houses. They're rolling hard, and I think we could flow to them and make a lot of money. So kind of when I was proposed to start sending it out of state, that's kind of when medical marijuana came into, you know, LA, and it started hitting hard. So it lowered the price. So now all of a sudden you have all these fucking dispensaries showing up, and it's all these fucking cornballs that don't sell bud. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a dude, now he's going to get in the game. But before he was like scared to fucking be out here in the ghettos and in the streets. But now that it's fucking legal, you got some lame that, you know, is not like in the popular clique or in the street clique, you know, like how I consider myself like an underground dude, right? So it lowers the whole price. So the dude hits me up and is like, hey, we could send some work to Detroit. And he was like, we could charge this much. So now I'm used to making, you know, $2,000, $1,200 on 1 pound, right? And I could dump, you know, a couple £100 within a few days. So I'm making a few $100,000 every couple of days. So now when the dispensaries come in, it fucks up my money. And I'm like, dude, like thinking to myself, like, this has got my shit fucked up. So when the dude hit me up on Detroit, I had a couple sit downs and I said, let's go. And he's like, I got a dude that will wheel it out. So our first run, as I shot him 80 pounds of Kush, sent him on his way, kept track of him the whole way. He's like, I'm at the hotel overnight, and he just wheeled it in the back of a pickup truck, right? And so it was cool, but when they got to Detroit, these dudes, you know, they're some hardcore fucking, you know, black gang member dudes in the urban streets of Detroit, you know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't, you know, like, these aren't nice people, you know what I mean? These are people that are thugged out, right? And so my friend just shoots them to me like, yo, these dudes are cool, you work with them. So then, you know, I'm shooting them, I'm calling them, I'm like, hey, I got this. And so now when I dropped the 80 pounds, I think at the time I charged them like $5,500. So what they owed me was like close to $1 million, you know? I had never met them. And I'm just like, cool, you guys, your bill is like 900 something, whatever it was at the time. Let me know when you get some money, we'll collect it. You know what I'm saying? At this point, so I start to work with them, and I would check back every few days, like, how you guys doing, man? What kind of money you got? You know what I mean? Like, what do you have to turn in? And they were slow, and they couldn't move it. And I was scratching my head going, what the fuck, you know? And then I realized that these dudes were just used to serving like Mexican stress bud. And they were in trap houses selling fucking lame ass weed that we don't get down with in California. And so I used to have a lot of sit downs with my people from Canada and some people at the at UFC events in Vegas.
That's fucking illegal.
So we would come out and we would have our meetings out there.
Are these motherfuckers into mixed martial arts? These fucking jerk-offs are in it for the money.
And it was a trip. When I would meet, we'd be meeting in like luxurious suites in almost like a fucking boardroom, where they would come and they would cater to me. They would say, okay, he wants his packing like this. I would have all these different, you know, members of you know, motorcycle clubs and kind of telling me, you know, how does, you know, what do you want? How can we make this better? What are we doing? And this type of shit. So eventually when I knew I was coming out there to have a sit down with my boys, I told the dudes from Detroit, you know, come out, let's meet. And so they came out to Vegas, and I basically like taught them how to do it. I was like, check this out, dude. It's in every fucking hip hop video. It's in all these dispensaries. Like, what I gave you is the best of the best. You know what I'm saying? This is fucking Gucci. This is Louis Vuitton. Like, you guys, you just got to do it this way. And I broke it down to them on how to fucking, you know, put this shit on the streets. No more than like, fuck, a week later, then all of a sudden the dude's like, hey, I got all the paper, let's go. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, fuck, that's beautiful, right? Yeah. So, and in most cases, like here in LA, I let people have a carryover balance. Like, let's say I shoot them, you know, 20 pounds, they owe me, let's say 60,000, right? I could say, okay, you know, and then they're ready to what we call re-up. And he wants to re-up, but he has 40,000. So now I shoot him another, you owe me 60, but now you owe another 20, so now you owe me 80,000. You know what I'm saying? But these dudes, they came 100. They had all the money, they're like, good. And so I was like, fuck, that's golden, right? So then I start kind of, you know, thinking, fuck, this is good, and I got to figure out my operation. How do I mastermind now that LA has died out and the prices have gone down? How do I fucking get out here to these other states where I can be on that level where I'm making a couple $100,000 every few days, right? So then I figured out ways of kind of doing my transportation. What I ended up doing is I ran across one of my boys from Seattle, was like, yo, bro, I know this old OG dude who has an airplane, and he's down. I talked to him, you know, and I was like, fuck, that could be cool, you know? So he basically said, hey, Sin, do what you want to do. Here's homeboy's number, here's his name. And he kind of allowed us, he just kind of stepped back and shot the pilot to me. So then I hit up this pilot, and he's like, fuck, probably in his 60s. You know, he's like somebody's dad type of shit, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I tell him, I was like, hey, you know, I start shooting you maybe like 200-300 pounds, roll out to Detroit, pick up paper, whatever. And he's like, cool, whatever you need me to do, you know? And so The first couple tries, like when the pilot would come, I went out there myself just to make sure that everything was cool. And I hadn't met the dudes in Detroit other than meeting them in Vegas. So now I'm in their territory, you know what I'm saying? And they're taking me over to their spots. Hey, we want to show you where we keep your work. We want to show you our traps. I remember going into a fucking trap house in Detroit, and there's nothing but like a couch and then nothing else, you know, maybe like a TV with some PlayStation and a DVD. And so I was like, okay, whatever, right? And so in LA, I know if you're coming to my house to buy some dope, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna, hey, Sin, I'm on my way over. In Detroit, it don't work like that. Anybody could come over. Like the neighborhoods know that's the spot. And anybody can knock on the door and be like, yo, what's up? You know, I'm gonna get whatever, you know, this, that, and the other. And so once I was in there, I was like, no fucking way. I gotta get the fuck out of here. You know what I'm saying? Like what am I doing? You know what I'm saying?
Lockdown's over. Get your yard time in. Exclusively at FreshOutSeries.com.